on a policy like free college for all?
Yeah, so the first thing I do is I say there is no such thing as free college, right? And I really wish politicians would stop using that term, because it conveys to people something that isn't true, which is that somehow we can provide this thing at no cost. What's really happening when politicians use the word free college, they don't mean free college. What they mean is forcing people who don't go to college to pay for those who do. Now, if you use the right words, you realize that this is not this great idea that they're talking about. It's not making college free. It's actually unjust. And what does it mean to force people who aren't going to college to pay for those who do? Well, think about this. If we're going to make college quote unquote free, that is, what we mean is the students don't have to pay. Who is going to pay? Somebody's got to pay. Well, the taxpayer's going to pay. Okay, well, who are the taxpayers? 4 years from now, the students who are currently not paying tuition are going to be out there working. They'll be the taxpayers. And so they'll be paying, not for themselves, but for other students. So the students themselves end up paying for the education. They just pay for it later after they get out. Well, that's what happens right now with student loans. With student loans, you don't pay now, you pay later when you're out. The only difference is we've replaced the bank with a government. But there's something importantly different here. Who else pays? Who else pays are people who aren't going to college. The guy in high school who decides he's going to go be a plumber and not get a degree, we're going to tax him. The people who never went to college, they're retirees now, we're going to tax them. We're taxing all sorts of people who didn't go to college to pay for those who do. That's a serious problem. I think morally it's a serious problem. But it gets worse. One of two things is true. Either a college degree is valuable or it isn't. If it is valuable, you don't need to make it free, because the money the student earns after he graduates will be enough to pay for the degree. That's what it means for a college degree to be valuable. The college degree will pay for itself. If the college degree is not valuable, then the student has no business studying this thing. Now, I may enjoy medieval poetry, and that's fine if I enjoy medieval poetry, but the fact is nobody else enjoys the fact that I enjoy medieval poetry. How do I know this? Because nobody's going to pay me to do a job that involves medieval poetry. And so I won't be able to pay back my student loans. So in that sense, that degree in terms of market value does not have value. When we make college free, we take away the pain of studying things that have no market value. And so what you're going to get is a preponderance of people studying things that are easy and have little market value, and a decline in the number of people studying things that are difficult and do have market value.
Okay. And I'm going to shift to a policy, Medicare for all. And so countries like Canada and England, they've implemented Medicare for all plans for a few decades now. In the United States, we have the highest drug costs in the Western world and not the best comparative average quality care compared to some of these Western countries, and many million underinsured. And I personally believe that we have a lot of free market alternatives to solve the issue of a lack of competition in the market. But what's your opinion on implementing a policy like Medicare for all?
Well, what we're trying to do here is to solve this problem you've identified of rising costs of healthcare. So let me start off by arguing that the rising price of healthcare is not the problem we think it is. And the way I'm going to argue that is as follows. If I give you the option of healthcare prices going back to where they were in the 1950s, everyone's going to say, yeah, absolutely. Give me this option. I want healthcare prices that they existed in the 1950s. Well, hang on. Suppose I give you that option of healthcare prices they existed in the 1950s, but you must also take healthcare quality that existed in the 1950s. Now people are going to say something very different because, in the 1950s, there were all sorts of things that killed people that today we have cures for, and some of them are expensive cures, but a lot of them are very cheap cures. And so if you gave people an option of 1950s healthcare prices with 1950s healthcare quality versus 2020 healthcare prices at 2020 healthcare quality, most people would select 2020 healthcare at 2020 prices. And what that tells me is, yes, the price of healthcare has gone up, but the value of it has gone up by more. How do I know? Because given the option, most people would choose today's prices in exchange for today's quality. So that tells me that these rising prices we're seeing are not necessarily a bad thing. They may actually be indicative of a good thing. That is that the value of our healthcare has become so astronomical. And you think about this today, even poor people can go into a pharmacy and buy medicine that will cure diseases that used to kill people. Andrew Carnegie, in his time, one of the wealthiest person, actually adjusted for inflation, one of the wealthiest people that have ever lived, his mother-in-law died of tuberculosis. Today, a cure for tuberculosis is very simple. It's low cost, but him, for all his billions, could not afford the cure. The difference is, our healthcare is much higher quality today. So that's my first thing. Be careful about the rising cost of healthcare, rising price of healthcare. I don't think necessarily it's entirely a bad thing. However, let's go on and say, well, maybe we could do better. Maybe we could have today's quality at a lower cost than what we have now. Okay. And so enter the government. What can the government do? Before we ask, what can the government do? Let's ask a different question. What can the government stop doing that's contributing to the problem? And there are a couple of things here that are pretty important. One is there are a variety of state laws that prevent insurance, don't prevent, but they make it difficult for health insurance companies to operate across state lines. And why do these laws exist? Well, because health insurance companies lobby the state government for these laws, because the laws keep out competition. If it were very easy for health insurers to work across state lines, then there would be more competition. And because of more competition, you'd see lower prices. Would it be a lot lower, a little lower? I don't know, but it would be lower. Second problem. A lot of states have mandated coverage for insurance. And what this means is if you're going to sell health insurance within a state, your health insurance by law must cover certain number of things, right? And so what are these things? I don't know, it varies by state. Sometimes it's eye care or whatever, some other kind of care, I don't know what, but there's a variety of things listed. Where does this list come from? Well, it comes from healthcare professionals in the state. For example, if I'm a dentist and my business would do better if insurance sold in the state were required to cover dental work. And so I lobby the state government, and you should require that all insurance cover dental work. And now why am I doing that? Because it helps my business. But what does that do? It causes the cost of health insurance to be higher. Now, there are some people who may want dental coverage on their health insurance. That's fine. But there will be other people who don't, that maybe they don't need it. They're not willing to pay for it, whatever it is. Those people don't have the option of not buying it. They're required to buy it. So imagine, to take an analogy, suppose we had similar laws with cars. The law would say something like, well, if you're going to buy a car in North Carolina, the car must have leather seats. It must have, a stereo system and video player in the back and all of that. And what's that going to do to your cars? They're going to be higher quality. You say, well, that's good. We have higher quality cars. It also makes them more expensive. And there are going to be some people who would say, well, look, I don't want all this extra stuff. I don't want the leather seats. I don't want the video thing in the back. Take them away in exchange for a lower price of the car. And we say, well, we can't do that because the law requires this. That's what we have done with health insurance. So there's two things that if the government stopped doing would contribute to the price of healthcare declining. Is that enough? I don't know. However, I would start, instead of asking what can government do, start by asking what can government stop doing. And after the government has stopped doing the various things that are contributing to healthcare prices being high, if healthcare prices are still too high, then you can ask what can government do.